Hi, Crystal. How are you?
I am well, thank you. How you doing?
Good, good. Welcome to the dialogues.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's all right. It's good to have you. I'm excited about the chat. So let's just, I think one of the things that is interesting is I'm talking to a lot of people all over the world, and the beauty of sort of technology in the world that we're in, it's really great to be able to do that. So one thing I've started doing is going, tell us kind of where you are. What's the world what's around you over there?
Where I'm at. So I'm looking out the window here. I live in Santa Monica, California. So that is part of Los Angeles. So I am basically on the beach, which is pretty cool, meaning when it's not super foggy and we don't have like the mist from the ocean, I can actually see the ocean here from where I live. So that's pretty sweet. I have been living here since 2011. I'm Danish. I moved to the US from Denmark, moved to California in 2009.
Yeah.
So I am now, I'm now a dual citizen in the sense that I have my home here. I have my American passport. I still have my Danish passport. I do go back to Denmark once in a while, whenever the world allows it, I would say.
It's tough at the moment. So are you, like the image I think I have and people have of LA is like rollerblading along the boardwalk in your whatever you're wearing, kind of like white.
My tiny shorts.
Is that you? Are you a LA person?
It's actually funny that you mentioned rollerblading because I've been seeing all these, girls on real roller skates, and now I'm like obsessed. I have to start roller skating again. I haven't roller skated since I was a kid, so I will be on the beach roller skating at some point. But it's funny that you mentioned the culture here because the culture have had a big impact on me. Because when I moved here, so as I said, my husband and I moved, we're both Danish. We moved to California together. We started out up in San Francisco. We're in San Francisco for a year and a half. Then we moved down here to Los Angeles. And I just remember coming down here, seeing all these amazingly fit people running around. That was kind of like my impression of LA was like, wow, everybody's in amazingly good shape. I think it's also because of the weather. A lot of people are running around without their shirts on or with very limited amount of clothing on, let's say like that. And there is an exercise culture here.
Yeah.
So that had a huge impact on me. Because when I moved here, I was like, this is so cool. I want this. I mean, I've always been active, but never to sort of the level I took it to once I moved here. And that was inspired by seeing all these people running around being super fit and doing all these things. I mean, you look at the window.
You weren't into fitness as much until you moved to LA.
I mean, I've always been active, right? I grew up in Denmark, meaning that I was on my bicycle every day, going from A to B, because that's a means of transportation, right? Also, my family didn't have a car for several years. So if you need to go anywhere, you need to take a bicycle or you need to take public transportation. And I'd rather be on my bike, to be honest. So I always biked everywhere. I, played a little bit of sports when I was younger. I did the last few years before we moved to the US, I would go to the gym like 3 times a week. I did boxing classes and I loved that. It was a lot of fun. But that was about it. It wasn't structured as it became once I moved to Los Angeles or here to Santa Monica. Because all of a sudden I saw, okay, well, I can actually take my fitness, from, it was a good base. Again, 3 times a week, that's pretty good. Then I would say my first job here in the US didn't really allow for that because I was traveling 5 days a week.
Yeah.
But moving here, seeing this, my husband then joined Gold's Gym here in Venice, which is like the original bodybuilding gym with, Arnold Schwarzenegger still comes by. He's way earlier in the morning than I am. But we started working out there and I got the bug, let me say it like that. And what that meant for me was taking it to the next level in the sense that starting to set dedicated fitness goals.
Yeah.
So like I want to lift heavier. I want to have more defined shoulders because there was also some physical sort of the more superficial part of it for me because I was like, this is beautiful. I love muscles. I think it's awesome.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think one thing also I realized was that this is not just about lifting up weight and putting it down again. It's also about eating right to feed that process and to enable me to get stronger and, you know, build those muscles that I wanted to build. So it's funny because a lot of people think I'm like, oh, you've been an athlete all your life. I'm like, not really. I
It's
mean,
pretty
yes, I was
cool
on my
actually.
best.
You can,
But
I think you can discover new pursuits as life goes on, like, and you can kind of, yeah, I think it's in some way reaffirming that, like, you know, you may be on a path, but you can change the path at any point.
yeah,
We've kind of jumped ahead, and I've got kind of lots of questions about what you've said, and I definitely want to jump into the fitness stuff, because that's a
yeah.
key part about, I think, what you bring to the world you're in and to the diabetes community. Just out of personal interest, though, and actually Sydney, so I think most people should know that I'm in Sydney. I think Sydney's a bit similar to that. There's this like early morning exercise culture here, and we have the weather, and we have like the landscape and the geography to support it, because we've got the harbour and it's beautiful, and so people are out walking, and, you know, and there's beaches and stuff. So I think there's some similarity there. Certainly, like the exercise culture here is off the charts, whether you like it or not. I don't mind it. But I'm personally interested in the San Fran LA thing, and this is like completely off topic a little bit, but just like out of personal interest, like, which is a better city? You lived
That's a
in both.
hard question. I mean,
Because
there's
we
a
have the
reason.
Sydney Melbourne thing where, like, you know, like there's this competition, this rivalry, and like Sydney has these attributes, Melbourne has these attributes, and like you're either a Sydney or a Melbourne person.
Okay, so to the story comes that in 2009, my husband got a job offer in the US. That's why we moved to the US together. Okay, so we got the option of like, you can move to San Francisco or you can move to, I think it was Austin, Texas. And for us, it was just like, we want to go to California, we want sunshine, we want the beaches, we want all these things. And then we moved to San Francisco, and we realized, like, every tourist who comes to San Francisco is that most of the year, San Francisco is not sunny. They do have beaches, but it's very cold. Most of the time it's like foggy. The year we were there is probably the wettest year in the history of California. It was so much
That's
rain.
saying something.
Say what?
That's saying something. It's like it's a wet part of the world, right?
And we lived in something called Russian Hill. It's a very nice area of the city. And I'm a city girl. You could go across the bay, you could live in sunshine. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not living in suburbia. We need to be in the city because that's what makes me happy. And we were on the 12th floor. And I just remember we were supposed to have like a side view, like out a window, you know, on the side of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
And then the year and a half we were there, we maybe saw that bridge once or twice, because all the time it was just, again, 12th floor, just clouds or fog, like swishing by the window. That being said, I did love the city. The weather, not so much, but the city, I think, especially coming from Europe, moving to a city like San Francisco was amazing, because you can walk everywhere. There's actually a lot of Scandinavians. So again, I'm from Denmark, which is Scandinavia. There's actually a lot of Scandinavians there. So it's a very easy starter city, I would say, for someone coming from Europe, moving to the US. We did end up moving, this sounds awful, but we did end up moving predominantly because of the weather. Like, this is not what we came to California for.
Yeah.
We wanted the sunshines, we wanted the beaches, we wanted to be outside more. So that's why we moved down to Los Angeles.
You didn't answer my question.
Well, again, there's the reason why I moved. I do prefer Santa Monica.
Oh yeah, cool. All right.
I'm not moving back. I'm not moving back.
From the weather. Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. So, do you want to give us a little bit about your story, a bit about your background? You've got type 1 diabetes. Suppose it could go without saying. I don't think anyone, oh no, I have interviewed people, at least one person with that diabetes. That was an endocrinologist. But most
still in the realm of diabetes. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty relevant. So yeah, when did you get diagnosed? Where were you? And how's it going?
Yeah, how's it going? That's a good one. I was diagnosed in December of 97. So that's 23 years ago, pretty much I don't have the exact date. I know a lot of people have like the exact date of the diagnosis. I don't know, maybe it's because it's 23 years ago. I don't know. Yeah, it's been a while. So
I know my diversity. My diversity.
Yeah, people celebrate it. I actually think it's cool. It's kind of like, if you see it as a badge of honor,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's kind of cool. I just don't. I mean, I just don't celebrate it because I don't know. But anyway, so 23 years ago, this December of 97, at that point, I was still living in Denmark. I was 19 years old. Most of us graduate, if you choose to go to high school, you graduate high school around that age. So this is the fall/winter after I graduated high school. And I had decided to take a year off to save up money to go travel the world. I wanted to go travel around India, just like open ticket, you know. A lot of people did that back in 97, a lot of Europeans. So we just, you know, you just go and you see the world and you come home whenever, and then you start school or your real life or whatever when you get back, right? So that was my plans. Yeah, so I was working 2 jobs. I was also partying a lot because, well, the legal age for going out and for drinking and all that is 18 in Denmark. So I was the legal age for that, and I was having fun. And I was so tired all the time. I was so tired. You know, it's kind of like, so I worked daycare and then I worked at a nightclub in the evenings. So of course I was tired.
Yeah.
It's like, of course I'm tired. But, you know, I would watch these kids, and you have to watch them also when they sleep. And once in a while I would fall asleep as well, which is not, you know, part of the job description. But and the same thing, you know, this come December, the family gatherings, you know, people celebrate Christmas in Denmark, most do. And I would sort of like nap between courses or before dinner, and my family's kind of like, this is odd.
Yeah.
There's something wrong. I was also drinking insane amount of liquids. I couldn't, you know, sleep through the night because I had to go up, use the restroom. I had to pee all the time. I couldn't sit through a movie theater. I remember going on a date and I had to go out twice during the movie. I don't know what he must have been thinking, like, what's going on here? She doesn't like me, like running out. But, and all these things. And it was just, my family's like, this is odd. You need, you know, go see a doctor. And me, again, I could rationalize everything. I was like, I'm just working hard, you know. I am peeing a lot because I'm drinking a lot. I'm trying to be a little more healthy. Maybe I'm not doing the best. I mean, I was also eating a pint of ice cream a night and not gaining weight, and I loved it. That was pretty amazing for me. I love ice cream. But anyway, I went to saw my primary care doctor, so my family doctor, and he gave me a lecture about, you know, looking out for myself. But he also asked the right questions. He's like, how much are you drinking? Are you feeling, you know, he was listening.
Yeah.
So ultimately, after at the end of the consultation, he's like, let's just measure your blood sugar. So he did like a finger stick in the office. And he's like, you have diabetes. He diagnosed me right there in the office. He might have explained it. He might not. I still to this day do not know. I just know that I left his office not knowing what diabetes was, just that I had that diagnosis, and I thought I'd been handed a death sentence. That's all I know. Again, I think when you get when you get a diagnosis like that, you're probably not listening. Or you don't take in all the information. Again, it's also 23 years ago, so that could have happened, you know, to my memory of it. But anyway, I remember biking home in Denmark. I'm on my bicycle, biking home, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And I got home. Yeah, this is also 97. So it's before, I mean, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't just Google things because you didn't do that back then. However, I'm very fortunate that I came home. My mom was home. I was still living at home at that point, and she's a nurse, and she knew enough about diabetes that she could explain to me to a point where she's like, you know, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And this was on a Friday, and the Monday after, I'm still puzzled that I was allowed to just go home for the weekend. But anyway, the Monday after, my mom and I went to a specialist, a sort of like a diabetes center. Just happens to be one of the best ones in Europe. So we're like 10 minutes from my home.
Which was that?
Steno, Steno, diabetes center. And we went there, and this is the best part about my diagnosis, I think, is that I was assigned a pediatric nurse. I was 19, but anyway, pediatric nurse named Lotte. And I remember her name to this day. And I remember her because she was the one, and I actually reconnected with her less than a year ago after all these years.
Wow.
which is pretty cool. Well, I did another interview and they're like, hey, I think I know you, Ladu. And they connected us. So that was special. But anyway, she was the one, and she now has told me that I'm paraphrasing, which roll with it, okay? But she was like, you know what? This diagnosis sucks, but there's nothing you can't do. This not be a barrier. This should not be a barrier for you to do whatever you want. And I kind of rolled with that. And that's how I live my life now. That's what I keep. I mean, if you read anything I write, you probably see that, you know, I always say that. It's like, there's nothing we can't do if we have access to, you know, our medications, obviously, we have access to information and the right mindset. And she basically trained me in diabetes, you know, that upfront training that you get. And I remember having a conversation with her, kind of like, so I was planning on going to India to backpack around India. What's going to happen with that? And she's like, you're going.
Yeah.
So I went. And within a year of my diagnosis, I was backpacking around India. Didn't go completely according to plan all the way through, but you know, I figured it out. And
it's interesting actually. When like one of the things that you mentioned there was like the initial reaction that people have when they get diagnosed. I was just reflecting on my own reaction, and I was working really hard, and I was in London training for the London Marathon. I got diagnosed, and I just remember kind of going to the hospital, had a chat to the dietitian. They said, you know, things like don't eat too much honey and stuff like that, you know, and they said, here's your insulin. And I left, and that was kind of it. I just went home and just got on with my life and never really like stopped, never really reflected that much, never really kind of like had that many, you know, much of a moment. It just kind of like, it just kind of just became normal pretty quickly for me. But I think that, you know, people have very different reactions, and you know, I imagine it could be quite a harrowing experience for a lot of people, that initial diagnosis period.
I think it also really depends on who's in front of you. I mean, if Lotte had been, oh, this is bad, you're never going to be able to live a good life, this is going to be like, if she had taken that approach with me, I might have tackled my life with diabetes slightly different. Or it might have taken me longer to get to the point where I was like, hey, this doesn't have to stand in my way.
Have you had any particularly challenging periods at all? Has it always been, you've always managed it really with the right perspective? Have you ever lost perspective?
I don't think I've lost perspective, but I've definitely had a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that, for example, it took me a really, really long time to understand that an A1C of 8 was kind of high.
Yeah.
Because...
Did you have an A1C of 8 at some point?
I did in the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, or not right when I was diagnosed. I'm sure that was way higher. I don't remember how much that was. But the first years of just managing, I was always just told, you're doing good. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point, I think I had an A1C of like 8.2 or something like that, which is not horrendous, but it could definitely be tighter, you know, assuming that you don't have too many lows and all that as well, of course. I just didn't realize that it was on the higher side until at one point I was reading something, you know, I was reading pamphlet or whatever saying, okay, guidelines is you maybe should have an A1C of 7.5 or lower. And I'm like, you know, I didn't know because nobody had ever told me, and I had never, you know, read it anywhere before. Again, this is also, okay, in the years, like the first 10 years, that's when Google kind of came through and we started Googling everything. But before that, you're kind of like you'd rely more on your doctors and, you know, whatever pamphlets they gave you. There's a lot of pamphlets. So I think for me, it was more about realizing, hey, things can be done differently. I remember going into my doctor after reading that. I'm like, I feel like this is the first time, and he got very shocked because I was like, I keep coming here and you give me my prescriptions and send me home and tell me everything is going well. I've learned now that I could probably do better. Can you please give me the tools so I can, or help me develop the tools so that I can, you know, manage my diabetes a little tighter, because I want to feel good right now. I don't want, you know, and I don't want diabetes to end up standing in my way down the line because I didn't manage it today.
How's your A1C now?
That's kind of like asking me my weight, isn't it? I don't mind sharing. I actually just published a YouTube video where I'm showing it. So it's like, it's out there.
Yeah.
So my last one.
Are some people sensitive about that question?
Yes.
Really?
I think it's, well, I think it's one thing, right? So first of all, if you have an A1C of 9, for example, and you're not super proud of it, it might be a sensitive thing to talk about.
Yeah.
I generally aim for an A1C of 6 to 6.5. That's
Wow.
my goal. I think goals are individual. The YouTube video I posted, my A1C was 6. Last one is 5.9. So I'm in that area. I would say that, I mean, it's also work.
Yeah.
But I think some people might also, so when you said if you're sensitive, I think one thing is some people might not feel comfortable talking about a high A1C, or if you have a high A1C, you might feel like you're being judged by others, like you're not doing a good job, or and there could be a lot of reasons why you have a high A1C, right?
Yeah, and totally. I have done a little bit of stuff in the social media space recently where I like shared images of my my CGM result.
Mm-hmm.
And like today it's good, right?
Yeah.
Right now it's good. I've had a good day, but
You're
I get
in range.
I get it. Yeah, I'm in range. But certainly if I look at my chart and it's like this, I'm like, do I want to share that? People know how loose I am.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, sometimes I have people reach out to me going like, so how do I eliminate fluctuations? I'm like, you can't eliminate fluctuations. Not even people. Well, I mean, that's not even going to do it, right? Because you still have hormones.
Yeah.
And you're still going to be impacted by a lot of things that is not related to food. Yeah. And I think even if I saw this awesome graph. We should try and find this and also put this in the notes or something. This awesome graph of blood sugar readings from people without diabetes. They don't have flat lines. Flat lines are for dead people.
Totally.
They don't. I mean, and it's such a misconception that we need flat lines all the time. Of course, we shouldn't be like, up and because that's stressful for the body, that's stressful for the mind, and all that as well. But I go outside the lines as well.
Yeah, I've known people who've put the Libre on, who don't have diabetes, go have a big bowl of noodles, and they'll be high. Like they'll be, 8 or 9. So yeah, you're right. Like there's variation in everyone.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, and that's the other thing. I often describe diabetes as, there's a lot of moving parts, and with knowledge, and I think with knowledge you can get your overall blood sugars down to sort of a more closer to a normal range without it being a normal range. But still, we don't have full information about what's going on in our bodies, right? So, for example, as I said, there's more than food that impacts blood sugars. Like, how did you sleep? What's your stress levels? For women, where are we at in our cycle?
So to get 5.9, to get 5.9, do you not eat any carbs?
Oh, I love carbs.
But you can get 5.9 and be eating pasta?
Yeah. The thing is, I always tell people, because a lot of people also think that exactly what you're saying, that you can't eat carbs, or you should go keto or whatever. I hated keto, by the way. The worst results I've ever had with my diabetes management, once in the later years, has been with keto. So keto didn't work for me. Keto is awesome for some people. It's not awesome for me. Anyway, what I find is that even you can eat crappy food. You can eat like the American diet and still have really good blood sugars. What it comes down to is knowing what you put in your body, having a good understanding of how it impacts your blood sugars and how to react. I'm talking about how to dose your insulin, how much and when, right? Because if you have a really, really good understanding of, okay, this kind of food is, let's say, high glycemic, meaning it's going to hit my bloodstream like that. If I know how many carbohydrates are in it, I understand the composition, and this is a lot of moving parts again. I understand the composition. There's a lot of fat, there's a lot of protein as well. Yeah. Then I can start to make the calculations in my head. I'm like, okay, so if it's high glycemic, I should probably pre-bolus. I should probably pre-bolus. So pre-bolus just simply mean taking insulin more, not right when you eat.
Yeah.
And from pre-bolusing for something high glycemic is probably not 10 minutes before. It's maybe doing half an hour before, and maybe even 45 minutes.
Yeah, wow. So tell me this then, when do you come unstuck?
When I come unstuck, what does that mean?
When do you mess up? Like, okay, let me tell you, that's what I think, like some of the challenges, like my A1C would be around 6.9 at the moment. And I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
5.9, I'm not sure I could survive that in terms of like the discipline I think it would take for me to get that. Because I like to be undisciplined sometimes. But like my challenges lately are, and if you want to charge me for a coaching session, feel free. But like, I come unstuck lately where like I'll have a massive bowl of pasta for dinner, right? And it's not like I haven't done that for like the last 15 years that I've been diabetic. I've done it. So you'd think that I somehow should know what the hell I'm doing and get it right. But I don't always still get it right. And what I'm finding, like one example happened this week. I had some pasta. I had my like 4 or 5 units. It was a smallish bowl. I had 4 or 5 units with that. And then usually what I'd do is then I'd potentially have another 1 or 2 units 4 or 5 hours later.
Yep.
And then I'd also take a bit extra long acting before I go to bed.
Yep.
So like I'll have 20 units in the morning was my normal long acting. And then I might have 2 to 4 units before bed, depending on what I've had for dinner. If I've had pasta for dinner or if I had a high GI meal. But you know, this particular night I had a hypo at like 3 a.m. because I'd taken 2 units, but I think it's because the bowl of pasta wasn't big enough. But there'll be days where like, probably lately actually what's happening is I'm finding that I'm waking up quite high in the mornings, even though I've done these things. And that maybe to me just says I need to titrate all of my doses up a little bit higher. But I think my point is that and maybe this is kind of the diabetes story, isn't it? And it's kind of the question I'm asking you. Like that's an example. I just feel like I never really. There's no such thing as perfection, and
there's not.
I'm never gonna nail it. But it sounds like you get closer to perfection than a lot of people, than me anyway.
Well, I mean, I think it also. So first of all, I don't get it right every time, right? Because then my A1C would be 5, and I would never have a low blood sugar, which is like not reality.
What is A1C for a non-diabetic? Do we know that? Is that 5?
So 5.7 to 5.9% is considered pre-diabetes.
Yeah, right.
So anything
quite fine ranges, aren't they? It does show how well controlled non-diabetics are.
Yeah, and I mean it's because they have a system that's doing everything for them, right? Yeah. It's also because the insulin that we inject acts differently than the insulin that it does act differently than the pancreas, drips into the body, in the sense that the insulin that we inject lasts 4 hours because we inject, That's different from a healthy pancreatic system. That one can like turn on and off in a way that we can't, right? So that's also the other thing, is that we have to act like a pancreatic system, not just as a pancreatic system. And we don't have full information. I don't know how we could ever get it right 100% of the time. I also think there's a big difference. So I don't mind checking my continuous glucose monitor frequently.
Yeah.
I don't mind taking injections whenever I see I start to climb.
Totally.
People ask me, well, how many times do you inject? I'm like, how many times I need to.
Yeah.
I don't care, because for me, it doesn't hurt, and it's not a hassle.
Surely that's the standard now anyway. Surely that's the recommendation, is you take what you need when you need it.
But for some people, that's not doable for several different reasons. Maybe it's too much of a mental burden. Some people are standing up 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day in a job where they can't necessarily go just check and inject or eat or whatever. Yeah. So there's a lot of different situations, I think, where people can't necessarily do what I do for whatever reason. And I think that's where it's completely, and that's also why all the endocrinologists are like, well, and if the good endocrinologists are like, well, A1C should be tailored to you, your needs, and your situation.
Yeah.
So everybody shouldn't be aiming for 5 or 6 to 6.5. I don't think so.
No, and we probably don't really know the realities when it comes to morbidity and mortality for someone like me who is, what did I say I was, 6.9 versus a 5.9 person. Like,
there's no clinical data on it.
No, there's not. And so that's the thing. I think we don't really know what world we're in right now, because the real world data that we have saying you need to control, we know time in range is a new kind of metric, right? And we know that control is important, but we don't know it to a fine-tuned kind of outcome where we can say that, a type 1 diabetic who gets a 5.9 versus a type 1 diabetic who gets a 6.9 will live longer or will have less XYZ morbidity and mortality. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting stuff, I think, where the people don't always, and also like when you get diagnosed, how long have you had diabetes for? Like that probably plays a bit of a role as well. So there's all sorts of little elements that we don't really know much about. I suppose the hope is that the world we live in, the information we have, that, hopefully a 6.9 can live as long as a 5.9.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's also a reason why the general recommendations say you should have an A1C of 7.5 or lower.
Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a wiggle room from 6.5 to 7.5, right? Really. But I think it's so important that we say it has to be personalized. There might be times in your life as well where you want, so this is not relevant for you, but if a woman wants to get pregnant, for example, she might need to focus a little bit more on her, blood sugar fluctuations and keep her blood sugars low to take care of herself and her baby. Whereas if you are in a situation where you maybe have hypo unawareness, meaning you don't feel your lows, and let's say you don't have a device like you and I have that shows and alerts, you might want to aim for a higher A1C or higher average blood sugars just to prevent that person passing out all the time.
Totally.
Or ending up in a dangerous situation. So it's just a lot of moving parts.
There is. Really good chat. Let's jump into the fitness stuff now. Okay. Because I like fitness. I think it does definitely help as a type 1 diabetic to be having some fitness in your life. Yeah. Tell us about your fitness. We kind of got a little bit of a sense of your fitness journey. So where are you at with it now? And it's part of your life, and it's also kind of part of your career, isn't it?
It is. So actually, it's a good. So let's just jump back to 2014. So 2014. Again, we moved here in 2011, and I started to exercise more. I told you because I saw these fit people. I was like, ooh, I want that too. A lot of people are like, oh, so it's because of your diabetes. I'm like, no, I just saw these people and I wanted that for myself. But that's kind of how I do everything. I don't think ever diabetes has driven me first, going like, it's because of my diabetes I do something.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, my diabetes just I have to figure that out after. Yeah, exactly. So what happened in 2014 was that I competed in my first bikini fitness competition, so bodybuilding competition.
Yeah.
Because again, I got really into it. I have a body that, works well for that kind of sport. And a lot of the professionals in my gym were kind of like, you should try this out. I was like, yeah. So I did that. And it was really fun. And I did really well, which was also fun. And I did that from 14 to 16. And then I stopped because it was messing with my head. I mean, it's very restricted. And for a lot of people leads to some unhealthy relationship with food. And that did that for me too as well. So I stopped. But what I wanted with that story was that, okay, so 14, I'm starting to compete in fitness competitions. That means that my exercise, my diet, everything is like, I'm counting every grain of rice, right? I'm measuring everything. And then of course there's that diabetes that comes along for the ride. And that's when I really realized, despite being active for years, was how insanely difficult it can be to exercise with diabetes. And I didn't even have a CGM at that point. So I was managing with finger sticks. And I would say to anyone who doesn't have access to CGM, you can do well with finger sticks, because I did. It's a little more work, but you totally can. So I realized how complicated that was. All I had from a doctor was one of those pamphlets I talked about saying eat 15 grams of carbs, which is completely, utterly useless for most situations. So I had to so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go online, because this is, 2014, we had Google, and I'm just going to find it. And there's going to be all these resources. It's going to be amazing. And I went online, and it was like crickets. There was nothing out there in 2014. There's nothing out there about how to do like what I would call, and I know what I was doing wasn't everyday exercise, but going to the gym, stuff like that. How do you manage that or how do you manage diabetes just doing those activities? It was nothing. There was a few articles about how to do like endurance sports, marathons, Ironmans, stuff like that. I couldn't care less. I don't want to do that stuff. I was like, that's not what I wanted. I need information. Help me. And there was nothing. So I'm a fairly structured person. You probably got that feel by now. So I created the resource for myself. I was like, okay, I'm going to write down everything. I'm going to take notes on everything, and I'm going to figure this out. And I did, actually fairly quickly. Fairly quickly, I realized this kind of exercise at this time of day is going to make my blood sugars go this or that way. If I do resistance training at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, if I do this kind of exercises, my blood sugar is going to go up first and it's going to go down later. So all these things I realized. And then, so I got my diabetes managed out, by myself. And then I started to document this online. I just had a little blog in the beginning where I was writing down these things, realizing then that, hey, I'm not the only one looking for this information, because there's a lot of type 1 communities generally, at least the people I interact with maybe, are fairly active, and they want to be active. They want to be empowered to be active without having like wacky blood sugars all the time, right? So that kind of took off, and that led to my husband and I in 2015 deciding that, there's enough of a demand here, in the sense that we're providing information for folks that they actually need. So we left our corporate jobs and we started diabetesstrong.com, which is my website now, right? So it started out, it's only being fitness. Yeah. Everything exercise and type 1
not diabetes related. Oh, so it was diabetes and fitness.
Yes. Well, it started out a little different, and then we took it. I mean, I'm one of those. I don't always go like, I kind of sometimes need a bit of wiggle room, because I was not talking about my diabetes a whole lot before 2015. I was one of those. I managed it, but I managed it by myself. I didn't necessarily, there was a diabetes community. So me if you go to diabetesstrong.com right now, my face is like right there. And I'm talking about diabetes all the time. I'm talking about diabetes here as well.
You're like a celebrity in the diabetes world.
Say what?
You're a celebrity in the diabetes world.
Hi. I don't know about that, but my face is all over the place.
You're in LA as well. Typical.
Yeah, that was weird, because I that's never something I sought out. Again, I didn't talk about diabetes, and all of a sudden I realized that my voice could help others.
Yeah.
All of a sudden realized that what my experience, had value. I didn't know that before.
Yeah.
And that kind of made me go full force, and I'm like, okay, this is it. We can help provide some information to a lot of people who need it. We can do it in a format where they don't have to pay to get to this information, right? So that's why diabetesstrong.com is completely free. And it's morphed. It's not just fitness anymore. It is everything health and diabetes for any type of diabetes.
Yeah.
So it's morphed in that way. So it's become my career. So as you know, where am I today? Well, today that is my full-time job. I run diabetesstrong.com. You did mention coaching. I am coaching people with diabetes, but I'm not working as a fitness trainer anymore. I did that for a few years. It was fun, but my strength is definitely providing information. My strength is when I do coach, I coach people about, well, how do you exercise with diabetes? Or I coach people about, just learning the basics of diabetes, because a lot of people don't know. Back to what you and I talked about before. I mean, there's a lot of, if you don't understand how insulin works, or if you haven't never been explained, how different types of exercise impact blood sugars, how are you supposed to manage it?
Yeah, totally. You said something earlier about your experience being of value.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really interesting moment of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's not common and not maybe easy, I think, for people to think about it in those terms, and maybe to have the confidence to go, I'm having an experience, I feel like I've learned a lot about my own experience, and I feel like I could actually share something and there could be something of value in my experience for other people. That's a nice way of putting it, and a nice moment to have had, I suppose, for you.
Yeah. I don't think I had a light bulb moment in that. It was like, all of a sudden, it kind of came sneaking up on me. As I think there started to be this feedback loop of me putting things out there and people going like, oh my gosh, this is helping me see something in my diabetes, or it's providing me a piece of information that I didn't have before that now means that I can go out and be successful on my own. So I think that feedback loop kind of reinforced it, and that's why I ultimately ended up being like, okay, it's okay sometimes that diabetes come first, and then, well, actually Christel with diabetes comes first, and then the just Christel comes after. And I don't mind it as such. I don't see myself as Christel with diabetes, but when I communicate with people, that's who I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I do think, so I didn't mention what I did before Diabetes Strong, but before Diabetes Strong, I worked in the corporate world, kind of a little bit like you. I worked in the corporate world. I was actually working for a pump manufacturer, and I was doing strategy for them.
So sorry to interrupt you with a technical problem.
Don't worry about it. No, what I was saying was I actually worked in the diabetes industry for years before making the jump to Diabetes Strong. So I was working for Medtronic, pump manufacturer, for a lot of years. I actually worked for Novo Nordisk back in the day as well. I worked in life science healthcare, life care health sciences. The other way around. Anyway.
Healthcare and life sciences, or life sciences?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, something like that.
We've got a pretty similar journey, I think, in many ways, in terms of our corporate career, both at diabetes, CGM wearers, now kind of like working immersed, in our own thing in the community.
Yeah, but I mean, the feedback loop I had when I worked for these big corporations were non-existent, because first of all, I was fairly far away from the end user, and I was doing all this strategy work, and it was very exciting. It was very high level, a lot of slides, but it's nothing like what I do now. I mean, now I have conversations with people like you. I have daily interactions with people living diabetes, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you're able to contribute more directly and get more direct feedback, and just for me, there's just a bit more purpose to every day, and the work. I never sit there and go, I never wake up and go, well, maybe I do, actually, that's a lie, but I don't do it as often. I'm like, I got to go to I got to go to work. I don't have that as much anymore.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it's not just me like providing things to others. When people reach out to me, they, provide me with knowledge, they, energy, whatever you want to call it. It's a loop. It's a feedback loop, right? It's not just me pushing slides over the table or talking to that one, diet buddy I have.
So how long's it been, actually? How long's it been since you left the corporate world and jumped into doing your diabetes thing?
How's it been? Which part of it?
When did you quit?
So I left in 15.
Okay.
So we're going to come up in 6 years. It's very different.
Has it just gone like, has it been always smooth sailing and successful, or have you had moments of doubt?
It's been successful all the way. I'm always no. So the thing is, actually, and this is kind of the interesting part, is I would not be able to do this alone.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done this alone. My husband and I, so first of all, we have very similar academic as well as work backgrounds. different industry though. We work really well together, and he is, what's a big difference between him and I, and we're equal partners in Diabetes Strong. The big difference between him and I though, is that I'm extremely risk averse. I hate risk. Yeah. I get nervous, and I would rather, you know, you should see my retirement plan. It's ridiculous. It's like the safest plan ever. I'm not ever going to make any money on it because I don't want to lose any money on it.
Right.
Anyway, he's not that way, right? He's more of a risk taker, and he's more like, this is going to be okay. You know, we ran the numbers. We know it's going to be okay. We're going to be fine. So I think had it not been for that dynamic of him like pushing me a little bit and me sometimes pushing back, first of all, I would probably never have left my corporate job and done this. So has it been smooth sailing? No, because again, we don't always agree. And we're running an online, it's technically an online publishing company. Diabetes. In the sense that, that's very technical, but in the sense that we provide information to people, we don't charge for it. However, we do, if you go to the website, you'll see we have advertising on the website. That's how we monetize the website, right? So that means that we are able to pay our bills if enough people come through the website, read articles, and thereby, you know, make us ad revenue. Yeah. In the beginning, when we started out, we didn't have a lot of people coming through. We had some, but not enough to actually, you know, make an income off of it. So in the beginning, we were paying for everything ourselves. We're paying our own salaries, and we did have some money saved up, and there we made mistakes. So we had to go back. We had to redo stuff. So this is not, it's interesting because it's so far from the industry I was in before.
Yeah.
Or my kind of line of work. Same thing for my husband. None of us are like tech folks either. We had to build a website. Like, how do you do that? Yeah. How do you optimize a website for search so that you guys can find us? How do you do all these things? And it's been a little, I don't think anyone likes to say so. You might, but anyway, most people's road is not like straight. It's like,
yeah.
And
I want
as
to
I
get
said,
of your husband. I want to, because if he's 50-50, because you're definitely kind of, it seems like 100% of the face of the business.
Yes. Early on, he's like, well, we learned earlier, he's like, when you talk about diabetes, nobody wants to see him, unfortunately, poor guy. But I mean, because he's not the one living with diabetes, right? So from a website perspective, I do a lot of content creation. We do have other writers on as well. I run our social media. I am our face outwards because I am the one living with diabetes, right? Whereas if somebody's interested in how the business is run, he does a lot of the back end stuff, right? So he makes sure it works out. He's I like him.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and he's been along for the ride. It's an interesting one. He and I met in 2000, so we've known each other for a really long time. I mean, we didn't meet, we actually met before that. We started to date in 2000. We went to the same high school. And people often ask me like, so how did you like tell him about your diabetes? Because at that point I was 3 years into my diagnosis and I didn't have to. I think I pulled out my insulin pen and he instantly knew what it was about because it just so happened that his older brother, so I think 6 years older than him, had been dating a girl for 10 years who lived with type 1 diabetes.
Oh, wow.
So basically he probably knew more about the condition when we met than I did. So it was never like, it was never weird. It's never an issue. And I don't have any good stories about how I taught him about diabetes because he kind of knew.
Yeah, the whole partner thing is a whole other can of worms, isn't it, actually? Like, we won't get into it today because I'm going to start to wrap it up. But the way, like, we've covered some really good stuff. And I think there's a lot of stuff left to cover as well with you. So I'm going to pose that we do a what do you call it? A take two,
follow up. I don't know.
A follow up because I think there's a heap more to cover. Just before we do wrap up though, do you want to kind of give, I mean, you've mentioned Diabetes Strong. Is there anything else that is going on with you guys at the moment that you think that the listeners might be interested in?
Oh, thank you for that. Oh yeah, bet. You bet. Thank you. So I would encourage anyone who wants to be, well, part of the journey. So we have something called the Fit with Diabetes Challenge that runs every January.
Yeah.
And January 2021 is going to be the next one. It's completely free. It's 3 weeks. And Fit with Diabetes Challenge can basically be whatever you want it to be. But I call it kind of like a diabetes boot camp. So we go through everything from goal setting, nutrition, exercise, but we also talk about the mental sides, kind of some of the stuff that we talked about. We talk about diabetes burnout. We talk about, well, how do you adjust your insulin in certain situations? And it's both type 1 and type 2, or 1.5 or 3 for that matter. I don't care. We have room for everyone. And the sign up is available here on the website. Just go on, type in their email, and they're on the list, and start getting emails when we start January 3rd. So highly encourage anyone to join. We also have a really cool Facebook group with 20-something thousand people, Fit with Diabetes community. That's where we host all the peer support.
Awesome.
Which I think is probably that group started with our first challenge in 2007. It's just like grown, because peer support is everything. It's so important.
It really is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is fun. Let's have
And I look forward to the next one now that we've committed to that. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
You too. Thanks.
Cheers, Christel.